Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. On the war-torn planet of Xyleris, a frozen hellscape shattered into jagged shards of ice. Relentless blizzards howled without end, sweeping away any trace of life that once dared to exist. The wind cut like invisible blades, shrieking through cracks in the ground, carrying shimmering ice dust that glittered like 1,000 splintered needles in the air. Beneath the sky choked with gray ash and war smoke, the faint light of a dying star pierced through, bathing the meters-thick ice in a dim glow, fractured reflections like the last gasps of a fading creature. This was no place for life. This was where death reigned, cold and merciless. Amid this desolate wasteland stood Sergeant Elias Kane, a lone human figure defying the brutality of Xyleris. His silver-gray combat armor was caked with frost, the metal plates clinging together like a second skin, creaking with every move he made. The wind battered him, rattling the cracked visor of his helmet, but his eyes, deep blue and blazing, cut through the storm like a beacon, unyielding flames in a world that sought to snuff them out. His breath escaped through the helmet's slits, forming fleeting clouds of white vapor that vanished into the flesh-searing cold, as if Xyleris itself were devouring his very existence bit by bit. He just completed a solo recon mission, a grueling trek across endless ice fields where every step was a test, every breath a dare against death. His heavy boots crunched into the ice, leaving spiderweb cracks in their wake, the sharp sound echoing through the eerie silence of this forsaken land. Elias was no stranger to solitude, to the wind's mournful wail that sounded like lost souls crying out, but today, something felt different. A chill stirred in his chest, not from the cold of Xyleris, but from an instinct honed by years of war, a premonition of something lurking ahead. Then he saw it, a strange ship, emerging faintly through the blizzard like a forgotten ghost. It lay tilted on the ice, its hull torn open, mangled as if clawed apart by some colossal beast in a fit of rage. Jagged metal shards jutted out, sharp and twisted, coated in a sheen of frost like the spines of a dead predator. Black smoke coiled from its ruined engines, swirling into the air, blending with the snow dust into a thick, choking fog that reeked of burnt metal and rusted oil. This wasn't a human ship, no crisp, angular lines of the vanguard force. Nor was it one of the nightmare-curved vessels of the Extermination Fleet. It was smaller, sleeker, its flowing contours suggesting it had been forged from liquid metal, now frozen solid in Xyleris's unforgiving grip. Elias froze, his hand tightening around the energy rifle at his hip, his breath slowing as he studied it. On his wrist display, a faint biosignal blinked, a tiny red dot, flickering weakly, like a candle about to gutter out in the storm. A life was slipping away right before him. His heart thudded harder, not from fear, but from a fierce sense of duty that had defined him through countless battles. "Sergeant Kane, report your status." Colonel Harrow's voice crackled through his comms, sharp and cold as the ice beneath his feet. Elias stared at the signal, his finger hovering over the response key, hesitating. "Found a crashed ship, sir," he said, his voice low but steady. "I've got a life sign." "Withdraw immediately," Harrow snapped, his tone slicing through like a blade. "That's Xar'thul territory. We have no jurisdiction there. If they catch you, the entire unit's compromised." Elias clenched his jaw, the pressure aching in his skull. The Xar'thul, tall, metallic-skinned beings with razor-sharp eyes and voices like thrumming engines, were humanity's reluctant allies against the Extermination Fleet. Allies, not friends. He knew the cost of disobedience, stripped of rank, locked in icy underground cells, or worse, executed by his own squad as a traitor. But that signal, it pulsed, faint but stubborn, a silent plea cutting through the storm, stabbing into his core. He reached up and killed the comms with a decisive flick, the static fading into the heavy silence of the blizzard. His breath grew heavier, each exhale a defiance against the freezing void. "Sorry, Colonel," he muttered, his raspy voice lost in the emptiness. "But I don't leave anyone behind." He stepped forward, his boots slamming into the ice, the crisp cracks drowning out the wind's howl. Each stride was a declaration against fate, against orders, against the death stalking him. As he neared the ship, unease prickled beneath his armor, cold as the gusts seeping through the cracks, sinking into his flesh. This wasn't a Xar'thul ship, he realized it instantly. Too refined, too alien, like a shattered work of art on a battlefield. He raised a hand, his power gauntlet whirring as it activated. With a single, forceful yank, he tore the ship's door open, the screech of rending metal piercing the air, mingling with the storm's roar. The panel clattered onto the ice with a hollow thud, revealing a chaotic wreck inside scorched wires, glittering debris, and a faint emergency light flickering in the gloom. It illuminated a motionless figure amid the ruin, a female Xar'thul. Her silver skin shimmered dimly, like moonlight veiled by storm clouds, her sharp eyes clouded with pain, glinting like broken blades. A long, jagged metal shard pierced her shoulder, pinning her to the floor, her teal blood pooling around her, freezing into shimmering patches in the brutal cold. Each breath she took was a soft groan, fragile yet defiant, like a breeze fighting through a tempest. She lifted her head slowly, her gaze locking onto his through his cracked visor. His helmet's translator buzzed, then rasped out her strained voice. "You, enemy?" Elias knelt beside her, his knee crunching into the icy floor, his hand trembling slightly as he assessed the wound. "Not today," he replied, his tone deep and resolute, an unshakable vow. He examined the injury deep, critical, her teal blood staining his gloves, but not yet hopeless. "I'm Elias Kane, Human Vanguard Force. I'm getting you out of here." She frowned, her eyes flashing with suspicion, sharp as freshly honed steel. "Why?" she whispered, her voice weak but challenging. "Your kind doesn't care for us." Elias didn't answer immediately. He gripped the metal shard, took a deep breath, and yanked it free with a swift pull. The sound of metal scraping flesh rang out, followed by her pained cry, but he didn't hesitate. His hands moved fast, grabbing emergency gel from his kit and smearing it over the wound. The gel foamed on contact with her blood, sealing the deadly flow. "Because I've seen too many die in this war," he said, his voice dropping, weighted with distant pain. "If I can save one life, anyone's I will." She stared at him, her eyes softening, like blades sheathed after a fight. "I am Veyra," she murmured, her voice faint but clear. "They call me the Watcher of the Xar'thul." Before Elias could ask more, the ground shook violently, as if Xyleris itself roared in fury. From the distance, the hum of Xar'thul warship engines cut through the storm, a death knell approaching. Towering silhouettes emerged, giant, fearsome figures wielding glowing energy rifles, their blue beams slicing the air like lethal lightning. "Damn it!" Elias muttered, hauling Veyra up with his armor's strength. She towered over him by nearly a meter, twice his weight in her torn gear, but he didn't falter. "Can you walk?" She shook her head, her legs trembling, but her metallic hands gripped his shoulders, cold yet firm. "No," she rasped, "but I won't let you die for me." Elias gave a dry laugh, the sound stark against the gunfire and wind. "Then we run together." He triggered his armor's boosters, the engines whining as he dragged her across the ice toward a cave he'd mapped earlier. Behind them, energy blasts erupted, blue beams melting the ice into scalding steam, shrapnel bursting around them like invisible bullets. A shot grazed his leg, the searing beam melting his armor, pain flaring like fire, sending him crashing onto the ice. His knee slammed down, cracking the surface, but before he could recover, Veyra yanked him up with astonishing strength. Her metallic hands clamped onto his arm, cold as ice but solid as steel. "Don't be so slow, human!" she growled, her voice a mix of pain and ferocity, overpowering the gunfire and wind. They stumbled forward, the cave's dark maw opening ahead like a gateway to life or death as the enemy's roar grew closer, echoing like a final judgment. The cave swallowed Elias and Veyra into its depths, drowning the howling wind outside into a distant murmur, like the whispers of forgotten ghosts. The air was frigid and oppressive, the rough stone walls jagged like fossilized claws, glinting faintly under the weak light of Elias's armor. His breath came heavy, each exhale a white cloud bursting from his helmet's slits, dissolving fast in Xyleris's flesh-biting cold. He leaned against the stone, the chill seeping through his armor, sinking into his bones, a reminder that life here was fragile, fleeting. His silver-gray suit creaked as he shifted, ice flakes falling from his shoulders and chest, shattering into glittering dust on the floor. Elias tilted forward, checking his wrist display. The screen flashed red, warning that his booster system was fried from the Xar'thul patrol's shot. A vicious blue beam had torn into his leg armor, leaving a charred scar and the acrid stench of melted polymers. But the emergency heater still hummed, a faint warmth radiating from the suit's core, a tiny flame pushing back the icy grip of death. He exhaled in relief, but his blue eyes remained sharp, scanning the cave for threats or a way out. Beside him, Veyra slumped down, her towering frame collapsing like a broken statue. Her silver skin shimmered dimly in the dark, like moonlight obscured by storm clouds, now streaked with teal blood that glistened like frozen gemstones. The blood dripped from her shoulder, each drop hitting the stone and freezing instantly into sparkling patches, beautiful yet deadly. Her torn armor groaned with every move, the clank of metal echoing with her ragged breaths, each one a struggle to cling to life. She lifted her head, her razor-sharp silver eyes glinting in the gloom, studying Elias with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "You're insane," she said, her voice hoarse and faint, but tinged with grudging respect. "Are all humans this mad?" Elias smirked, a flicker of light in the storm. He wiped dried blood from his cracked visor, leaving a faint red smear. "Only when we've got a reason to survive," he replied, his tone deep and steady, cutting through the cold like a blade. He tilted his head, his blue gaze locking onto her, waiting. "What about you? Why do they want you dead?" The question hung between them, heavy as the stone overhead, poised to crash down. Veyra went still, her silver eyes closing briefly, as if sinking into a dark memory. The cave fell silent, save for the drip tick, tick, tick of her blood, like a heartbeat fading away. Then she opened her eyes, her gaze sharp again, but her voice trembled, blending resolve with deep fear. "Because I know the truth," she said, each word a stab into the darkness. "A secret the Xar'thul leaders want buried about a weapon they're building, not to fight the Extermination Fleet, but to wipe out humanity once the war's over." Her words hit Elias like a gust of frozen wind, chilling his blood despite Xyleris's cold already gripping him. He leaned closer, his blue eyes widening, his voice dropping to a restrained growl. "What did you say?" He clenched his fists, nails digging into his torn gloves, the pain drowned by the shock surging through him. "Humans and Xar'thul are allies. We bled together for 3 years of hell, fighting back to survive." Veyra gave a harsh laugh, the sound echoing like metal snapping under strain. "Allies?" she repeated, her tone dripping with scorn. "You're too naive. Our leaders, the Iron Council, see humans as a threat. You adapt too fast, break rules too easily. They fear that once the Extermination Fleet falls, you'll turn your blades on us, and they won't risk it." Rage flared in Elias, a searing fire in his chest clashing with the surrounding cold. He gripped his fists tighter, blood seeping from an old wound, staining his torn gloves red. "That weapon," he snarled. "What is it?" Veyra closed her eyes again, her silver face tightening, as if facing a nightmare she couldn't escape. "A device called the Shatterwave," she whispered, her voice quivering like wind over thin ice. "It emits an energy pulse, silent, ruthless, that can shred the nervous system of anything without Xar'thul genes. They tested it on a small human colony at the system's edge. No one survived, no screams, no chance to run. Just bodies sprawled out, eyes wide open, like statues left to rot in the snow." Elias's stomach twisted, as if he'd been gut-punched. He remembered Delta 700's missing months ago, vague reports blaming the Extermination Fleet. No enemy wrecks, no signs of battle, just dead silence. Now it clicked, a blade plunging into his heart. "And what were you going to do with that secret?" he asked, his voice hardening like the ice beneath him, each word a challenge. Veyra opened her eyes, her silver gaze piercing him, blazing with a defiance he'd never seen in a Xar'thul. "Stop it," she said, her voice firm despite its weakness. "I sent a warning signal to a resistance group among my people, ones who see the Iron Council as a danger too. But my ship was shot down before it finished. I can't do it alone. She clenched her fist, her metallic nails digging into her palm, leaving glittering scratches. I'm not alone, she murmured, her voice soft but fierce. There are others of resistance beneath the ice, led by my kin, Lyra. They know the Iron Council's a threat too, but I don't know if my signal reached them. Elias stared at her, a being from a race he'd once thought cold, emotionless. But now he saw a fire in her, not in her silver skin, but in her unyielding spirit, something so human, so like him. He extended a hand, palm up, trembling slightly from the cold and his wounds. Then we'll do it together, he said, his voice low but resolute, a vow forged in the dark. Veyra studied his hand, her silver eyes flickering with hesitation, then she placed hers atop it. Her metallic grip was icy, like melting frost, but her clasp was warm in a way that defied the cold, a spark of hope amid the storm. You're strange, Elias Kane, she whispered, a faint smile tugging at her lips, weak but genuine. But the moment shattered. A deafening blast erupted from the cave's entrance, stone fragments raining from the ceiling like tiny daggers. Elias sprang up, yanking his energy rifle free with lightning speed, its blue glow lighting his scarred face. Veyra staggered to her feet, clutching her wounded shoulder, teal blood seeping through her fingers, but her eyes stayed sharp, ready to face whatever came. Through the thickening dust, 3 towering figures emerged, Xar'thul warriors, massive as living machines, clad in glossy black armor, their red eyes glowing like fresh blood in the dark. Watch her! One roared, his voice booming like clashing metal, shaking the cave. You've betrayed your kind! Veyra stepped ahead of Elias, her body trembling from blood loss, but her metallic legs stood firm like pillars. No! She snarled back, her voice hoarse but powerful. You're the betrayers! The Iron Council will destroy everything we've built, humans and Xar'thul alike! The leader laughed, a chilling sound like a blade slicing air, and raised his energy rifle, its blue glow flaring bright. And you think this human will save you? Before Elias could react, a blue beam shot out, fast as lightning, aimed at Veyra. He lunged, shoving her down onto the icy stone, the impact ringing out. The beam grazed his arm, tearing through his armor, searing his flesh with a burning stench. Run! Elias shouted, his voice overpowering the blast, dragging Veyra deeper into the cave. Behind them, the Xar'thul's heavy footsteps thudded, relentless as a death knell. Energy shots fired, shattering stone into flying shards, slicing the air like invisible arrows. They plunged into a narrow tunnel, darkness swallowing them whole, but Elias knew this wasn't escape. It was a delay, a fragile breath before the real storm hit. They needed a way out, or a miracle. The narrow tunnel dragged Elias and Veyra deeper into Xyleris's core, where darkness thickened like a living shroud, consuming all but the faint glimmers of his armor's light flickering a few meters ahead. The air was suffocating, frigid, the jagged stone walls like the teeth of some ancient beast frozen in time, coated in shimmering ice that cast ghostly reflections. The Xar'thul soldiers' footsteps echoed behind them, slow and steady, a drumbeat of pursuit that never faltered. Each sound was a lethal promise, patient predators waiting for their prey to collapse under the planet's merciless cold. Elias supported Veyra, his arm locked around her metallic limb, feeling her towering frame grow heavier, like a machine running out of power. Her teal blood soaked through his glove, cold as melting ice yet strangely warm, a flicker of life against Xyleris's deathly grip. Their steps rang out, his boots clashing with the stone, blending with the faint groans of her torn armor, a desperate symphony of survival and demise. He glanced at her, his blue eyes flashing through his cracked visor, searching for a spark of hope in her silver face, now paling from blood loss. We can't keep running, Veyra gasped, her voice fading, broken like wind choked by a storm. Her words reverberated in the tunnel, small but piercing, striking Elias's chest like an icy blade. He stopped, easing her against the stone wall, his knee crunching into the frozen floor. Kneeling before her, he gently checked her wound. The gel had hardened into a thin, gem-like crust, but teal blood still trickled from the cracks, a slow, relentless river draining away. I won't let them take you, he said, his voice hard as forged steel, each word an unbreakable oath. You've got to live to stop that weapon. Veyra gave a faint laugh, a raspy sound like wind over shattered ice. Her silver eyes glinted in the dark, dim but still sharp, like worn blades refusing to break. You're a fool, Elias Kane, she whispered, her tone laced with mockery yet warm with feeling. Why risk yourself for me? Elias met her gaze, his eyes softening for a moment, a flame calming amid the tempest. Because if you're right, he replied, his voice low. It's not just humans in danger. Your people are too. The Iron Council won't stop at us, they'll devour everything. Veyra fell silent, her silver eyes locked on his, then her metallic hand tightened around his arm, cold but strong, a silent pact between two beings from alien worlds. He stood, his breath clouding white, and swiped his wrist display. A faint signal blinked, a side tunnel leading to an old Xar'thul storage cache, a few hundred meters away. His head snapped up, blue eyes scanning the dark, calculating. If we're lucky, he said, his voice steady, we'll find a ship or weapons there. He pulled Veyra up, his arms circling her waist, hauling her heavy frame upright. They moved on, steps slow but resolute, his boots clanging against the floor, her breaths labored. Behind them, the Xar'thul's footsteps grew closer, unyielding as a countdown to doom. When they reached the cache, the sight stopped Elias cold, as if he'd stepped into another realm. The man-made cavern stretched wide, a frozen cathedral of ice pillars glinting like shattered crystal under his armor's faint light. Massive metal crates loomed, frost-covered and rough, like forgotten statues holding Xyleris's ancient secrets. At the center stood a small ship, not a grand war vessel, but an old scout craft, its hull dented, engines half-dead with scorched wires spilling out like severed veins. Yet it stood defiant, a last flicker of hope amid the wreckage. This is our shot, Elias said, his voice ablaze with resolve, pulling Veyra toward it, his pace quickening despite the ache in his burned limbs. Veyra scanned the ship, her silver eyes sparking with faint hope. This is the kind Lyra used, she murmured, her hand brushing the dented hull, cold but carrying a distant memory. If the Resistance got my signal, they'll find us, but we have to survive first. Elias nodded, silent, his grip tightening on the controls, determination roaring in his chest. But before he could check the engines, a guttural roar shook the cavern, stone dust raining from the ceiling like icy hail. 3 Xar'thul warriors stormed in, their massive forms filling the entrance like engines of death. Leading them was a giant, his arms fitted with glowing energy blades, blue light sparking from the edges, illuminating his scarred metallic face. Watcher, he bellowed, his voice deep as a throttled engine. You've gone too far. The Iron Council demands your death, and this human's too. Elias raised his rifle, his hand trembling from the burn, but his blue eyes blazed, unflinching. If you want her, he roared, his voice thundering through the ice, you'll have to go through me first. The fight erupted instantly, the cavern trembling with gunfire and clashing metal. Elias fired relentlessly, blue beams tearing through the dark, but the Xar'thul moved faster than he'd expected, supernatural speed, their metallic armor deflecting shots into glittering arcs, predators evading a hunter's blade. One charged, his energy blade slashing the air with a piercing whine. Elias rolled aside, lightning fast, but the blade carved a deep gash into the ice, leaving a smoking scar. Veyra, though weak, grabbed a metal rod from the floor, her silver hands trembling yet fierce. She lunged, driving it into a soldier's leg, piercing his armor, dropping him with a howl as teal blood sprayed across the stone. The leader pressed on, his red eyes blazing like hellfire. He swung his blade at Elias, blue light flashing like lethal lightning. Elias dodged again, but the edge grazed his shoulder, shredding his armor, blood spilling red and hot against the cold. You can't win, human! The leader laughed, his voice echoing like breaking steel, raising his arm to finish him. But Veyra's cry cut through, sharp and fierce, drowning the enemy's roar. With her last strength, she hurled the rod into a nearby fuel crate, her silver hands flashing in the dark. The crate exploded, flames erupting like a living beast, engulfing two Xar'thul in a roaring inferno, their screams swallowed by smoke and ash. The leader spun, fury blazing in his red eyes, but Elias seized the moment. He charged, every muscle in his armor straining, and rammed his rifle into the Xar'thul's chest, firing without hesitation. The blue beam punched through the metallic armor, tearing his torso apart, dropping him with a heavy thud, lifeless, teal blood pooling like shimmering oil. Elias panted, his breath fogging white, turning to lift Veyra, who crumpled from exhaustion, her silver legs buckling. "You okay?" he rasped, cradling her tightly. She nodded weakly, her silver eyes fading but alive. "Thanks to you, we're still here," she whispered, her voice soft yet warm. Elias grinned, a tired but defiant smile, pulling her onto the scout ship. He slammed the ignition, the engines whining, black smoke billowing from the damaged core, but the craft shuddered and lifted off. Yet as they steadied, another distant blast roared, a larger patrol approaching, their engines growling through the storm like a declaration of war. "Not done yet," Elias muttered, slamming the throttle, his blue eyes burning with resolve. The ship shot out of the cave, slicing through the blizzard, but Elias knew they weren't free. The fight had only just begun. The scout ship tore through Xyleris's frozen expanse, slicing through the thick blizzard like a blade ripping an endless white shroud. Its engines screamed, a feral roar blending with the howling wind, a mad symphony of life defying death. Elias gripped the controls, his knuckles white beneath torn gloves, his blue eyes locked on the radar where 3 red dots pulsed like demonic eyes, the Xar'thul patrol ships closing in with terrifying speed. Each blip was a threat, a heartbeat of doom ticking closer through the icy storm. Sweat rolled down his brow, freezing into tiny beads before it hit his battered silver-gray armor. Beside him, Veyra slumped against her seat, her towering frame tilted, her trembling silver hands binding her shoulder with a strip torn from Elias's undershirt. The white fabric was now stained with teal blood, shimmering like gemstones under the console's dim glow. Her breath came shallow, ragged gasps like wind choked by the storm, but her silver eyes remained razor-sharp, glinting like freshly forged blades. She lifted her head, her gaze snapping to the radar, then to Elias. "They'll catch us in 5 minutes," she said, her voice calm yet cold as cracking ice, unshaken despite their razor-thin odds. Elias shot her a glance, a grim smile tugging at his lips, sharp as light-off snow. "Then I'll give them a surprise," he growled, his tone low but blazing with resolve, a fire igniting in the tempest. He yanked the controls hard, the ship shuddering as it veered into a narrow ice canyon. Towering cliffs loomed ahead, jagged like the maw of a frozen titan, their frost-coated edges gleaming like spears poised for prey. Ice chunks scraped the hull, clanging harshly, shards pelting the cracked windshield like hail, but Elias held steady, weaving past falling pillars with heart-stopping precision. Each dodge was a breath held, each impact a dare against fate. "You're truly mad!" Veyra shouted, her voice ringing in the cabin, laced with a thrill she couldn't hide, a warrior reveling on the edge of life and death. A deafening blast shook them, the ship lurching. A Xar'thul patrol missed its shot, a blue energy beam tearing the air, slamming into the canyon wall, melting a massive slab into scalding steam. The ice collapsed, blocking the other 2 ships in an earth-shaking crash, dust swirling like a shroud of death. Elias laughed, a raw, jagged sound cutting through the engine's whine. "Mad, but it works!" he roared, his blue eyes flashing with triumph. But the victory evaporated like mist in the wind. The radar flared red not from behind, but ahead. A massive black shape loomed in the canyon, gleaming like living shadow, its metallic hull a wall of doom barring their path. Elias squinted, his heart pounding, breath catching. "That's not Xar'thul," Veyra whispered, her silver eyes widening, a rare flicker of fear sparking within. Before he could react, a voice crackled through the ship's comms, cold, sharp, and chillingly familiar. "Sergeant Kane, you're one hell of a problem," it rasped, echoing in the cabin. Elias's grip tightened, the metal groaning under his hands. It was Colonel Harrow, his commander. The ship ahead bore the Vanguard Force emblem, stark against its dark hull, an undeniable truth. Colonel? Elias barked, his voice a thunderclap, hands aching from their grip. What are you doing here? Harrow's dry laugh grated through the speakers, cold as metal on ice. Saving you, of course, he replied, his tone steady but laced with hidden menace. Though it seems you don't need saving anymore, with how you dive into trouble. Land the ship. We need to talk. Elias hesitated, his blue gaze darting to Veyra. She shook her head faintly, her silver eyes glinting with warning, sharp as unsheathed steel. Don't trust him, she hissed, her voice low but certain, a whisper from the depths. He shouldn't be here. But Elias had no choice. Behind them, the Xar'thul ships roared closer, their engines a death knell through the storm. Ahead stood Harrow, a specter from his past. He gritted his teeth, easing the controls down, the ship jolting as it settled onto a flat patch amid the canyon, metal clanking against ice. He kept a hand on his energy pistol, finger poised, blue eyes fixed on the hatch as it slid open. Colonel Harrow stepped out, a tall, scarred man, his black command armor gleaming like living night, each step a heavy thud on the ice. Flanking him were two human soldiers, weapons raised, blue light from their barrels glinting off their stony faces. Elias, Harrow said, his voice calm but cold as a wind-swept plain. You've gone too far. Taking a Xar'thul prisoner without reporting? You know the rules. Elias stepped from the ship, planting himself like a steel wall before Veyra, his blue eyes blazing defiance. She's not a prisoner, he snarled, his voice hard as forged steel. She's an ally. And she knows a secret: the Iron Council's hiding a weapon to wipe us out. Harrow raised an eyebrow, his sharp gaze flicking to Veyra, a faint smirk curling his lips. Interesting, he mused, his tone dropping. But you think I'd believe a Xar'thul? Before Elias could retort, Veyra stepped forward, her silver legs steady despite her trembling frame. Ask yourself, Colonel, she said, her voice slicing the air like a blade. Why are you here, in Xar'thul territory, right as we're hunted? Harrow went still, his eyes locking onto hers, then a slow, chilling smile spread across his face, dangerous as melting ice on a knife's edge. Smart, he said, his voice a low rumble. Maybe you're more than just a watcher. He gestured, and his soldiers snapped their guns toward Elias, not Veyra, blue light flaring like deadly sparks. You've been played, Elias, Harrow said, his voice heavy, a sentence delivered. I've known about the Shatterwave for a while. And I agreed with the Iron Council after the Extermination Fleet's gone, humans will control the Xar'thul, not the other way around. She's a threat, and you're a traitor. Elias's heart skipped, the ice beneath him cracking in his mind. Harrow, the man he'd respected like a father, who'd led him through blood-soaked wars, was a double-crosser. He raised his pistol, hands shaking with rage and shock, but Harrow was faster. A blue beam shot from his gun, striking Elias's hand. The weapon clattered onto the ice, shattering with a crisp snap, blood spilling red and freezing instantly in the cold. Take him, Harrow ordered, his voice icy as the canyon wind. But then, a colossal blast shook the ground. Xar'thul patrol ships crested the canyon ridge, blue energy cannons ripping the sky, slamming into Harrow's vessel. It erupted into a massive fireball, crimson flames swallowing the metal, black smoke billowing into the storm. Amid the chaos, Veyra lunged, her silver hands dragging Elias back to the scout ship, her last strength flaring like a dying flame. They don't know Harrow's with them, she shouted, her voice cutting through the blasts. They scrambled aboard, Elias slamming the controls, the engines roaring to life. The ship surged forward, slicing through smoke and ice, the ground trembling under enemy fire. But Elias didn't look back, his blue eyes burned, fixed ahead where hope still flickered. As the fireball consumed Harrow's ship, a figure burst from the cockpit, swift as a black lightning bolt through the haze. Colonel Harrow, his charred command armor smoking, crashed onto the ice, his breath steaming thick and white. A small Xar'thul squad, hidden in the canyon shadows, rushed forward, hauling him onto a tiny rescue craft, a machine lurking behind ice pillars, its engines whining faintly but enough to carry him from the chaos. Harrow's blade-sharp eyes glinted, cold and unbroken, watching Elias's ship vanish into the blizzard. When the scout ship burst from the canyon, black smoke from Harrow's explosion swirled behind, mingling with the storm's thick ice dust in a shrieking blizzard. The Xar'thul patrol's energy cannons still thundered, but their blue beams faded, swallowed by the endless white as Elias pushed the engines to their breaking point, metal shuddering like it might tear apart. He glanced through the shattered windshield, breath heaving into white clouds, blood dripping from his wounded hand onto the floor, freezing into red streaks. Beside him, Veyra clutched her injured shoulder, her silver hands trembling yet relentless, tapping the console to restore calms amid the wind's roar and the ship's dying groans. "We can't run forever," she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion, slipping out like wind strangled by the storm. Her words stabbed Elias's chest, cold and sharp. "Harrow will alert the Iron Council. They'll hunt us down, no rest, no mercy." Elias turned to her, his blue eyes blazing like an unquenchable fire. "Then we fight," he growled, his tone deep and fierce, a thunderclap across the ice. "You said there's a resistance, where are they?" Veyra leaned in, her silver hands slamming the console, a faint red signal flickering like blood on the screen. "A hidden base under the ice, 20 kilometers out," she replied, her voice weak but firm. "If we can reach it." Her words cut off as a blast rocked them. A Xar'thul ship's blue beam tore into their wing, spinning the craft wildly like a wounded beast. "Hold on!" Elias roared, his voice drowning the engine's scream, yanking the controls with every ounce of strength, muscles taut as steel cables. The ship crashed onto the ice, a thunderous boom echoing as it skidded across the vast plain, leaving a trail of black smoke and glittering debris. Elias stumbled from the wreckage, blood dripping onto the ice, freezing instantly. Veyra clung to his shoulder, her silver legs shaking, but her eyes stayed fierce, unyielding. Before them loomed a nightmare, dozens of Xar'thul warriors, their massive forms blotting the horizon, led by one in crimson armor, the Iron Council's mark, a hellfire blaze amid the snow. "Watcher!" he bellowed, his voice a throttled engine's growl. "You chose the wrong side." Elias stepped in front of Veyra, weaponless, battered, but his voice rang steady as forged steel. "She chose right, truth over destruction." He shot back, each word a blade in the frigid air. The Xar'thul laughed, a jagged sound like breaking metal, his energy sword flaring blue, radiating lethal heat. "Then die together," he snarled, raising the blade, its light a fatal flash. But the ice quaked, Xyleris roaring in rage. From below, small ships erupted, engines screaming, the resistance led by a golden-skinned Xar'thul female, her presence a blazing torch in the dark. "Sister!" Veyra cried, rushing to embrace her, silver hands clasping tight in a fleeting reunion. Battle erupted, the plain trembling with gunfire and clashing energy blades. Blue, red, and gold light lit the ice, a dazzling yet deadly clash. Elias grabbed a fallen Xar'thul's rifle, its blue beams flaring as he fought beside Veyra. They moved as one, a dance of life and death. He cut down foes, clearing her path, while she tore through armor with Xar'thul's strength, shielding him. Each shot, each strike screamed defiance. They would not yield. Amid the chaos, Elias spotted a familiar figure, Harrow, alive, commanding Xar'thul from a small ship like a ruthless puppeteer. "Harrow!" he roared, charging like a predator, voice booming over the blasts. Harrow turned, a cold smirk splitting his lips, his blade-sharp eyes glinting under the ship's red glow. "You never learn to quit, do you?" he rasped, firing a shot. Elias dodged, the blue beam grazing his shoulder, melting armor with a burning stench. He leaped aboard, slamming a fist into Harrow's face, the crack of bone sharp and satisfying, knocking him onto the ice. "This war doesn't need men like you," Elias snarled, pinning Harrow down with a heavy boot. Harrow laughed, blood streaming from his nose, staining his scarred face red. "Think you've won?" he wheezed, venom in his weak voice. "The Shatterwave's active, its core's charging. In minutes, it'll wipe out everything without Xar'thul genes. All die except us." Elias froze, the ice beneath him shattering in his mind, but a spark flared. There was still time, however brief. Before he could act, Veyra appeared, hauling him onto a resistance ship with her last strength. "We can stop it!" she shouted, her voice cutting the wind. "The main station's at the North Pole!" The resistance ship surged forward, carrying Elias, Veyra, and their final hope, slicing through the blizzard like a blazing knife. As they sped over the ice, Elias gripped Veyra's hand, feeling warmth in her silver skin amid the lethal cold. "If we make it," he said, his voice low but warm, "I'll show you what humans fight for." Veyra smiled, her silver eyes burning like eternal flames. "And I'll show you the Xar'thul's fire never dies," she replied, her grip firm, cold yet fierce. As they crossed the plain, the radar flashed red, not Xar'thul, but a distant, chilling signal nearing from the system's edge. Veyra leaned in, her silver eyes wide with shock. "They sent it," she whispered, trembling. "The Iron Council, they triggered the Shatterwave earlier not to fire it, but to summon them." Elias clutched her hand, his blue eyes blazing. "Summon who?" he demanded. "The Extermination Fleet," she answered, her voice sharp as a blade through the air. The resistance ship reached the main station at Xyleris' North Pole, a fortress of ice veiled among towering pillars, glinting like broken glass in the dark. Elias kicked the door open, rifle glowing, leading Veyra and the resistance inside. Iron Council soldiers waited, weapons flaring in the gloom, blue and red light painting the ice like bloodstains. "Guard the reactor!" one roared, his voice a machine's growl, but Elias didn't flinch. He gunned down two, blue beams piercing their armor, paving Veyra's way to the Shatterwave console, her silver legs trembling yet resolute. "Get me closer!" Veyra yelled, clutching her bleeding shoulder, teal blood seeping through her fingers. Elias vaulted onto a platform, pulling her up as the ice shook under external blasts, explosions echoing like Xyleris' fury. They faced a massive Xar'thul officer, his silver hands wielding a blazing energy sword. He swung, the blue arc slicing air, and Elias threw himself in front, taking the blow for Veyra. The blade carved his shoulder, red human blood mingling with her teal on the floor, hot against the cold. "Go!" he bellowed, shoving her toward the console, his body shaking but unbroken. Veyra typed commands with trembling hands, the Shatterwave's red lights flashing wildly, a beast's heart about to burst. "It's about to fire!" she screamed, panic lacing her fierce voice. Elias, despite the pain, snatched a rifle from the floor, blasting the device's energy core, blue beams shattering metal in a chain reaction that rocked the station. "Run!" he roared, dragging Veyra out, his legs faltering but relentless. The station exploded behind them, a blinding white flash swallowing everything, the shockwave hurling them down as the resistance ship lifted off just in time, streaking through Xyleris' sky like a flame defying the storm. The shockwave from the main station's explosion rippled wide, rattling the resistance ship as it tore through the blizzard, engines screaming like a wounded beast. The blinding white faded, giving way to red sparks raining from Xyleris' sky, a meteor shower blazing in the frigid dark. Elias gripped the controls, his wounded hand bleeding red through makeshift bandages, staining the cold metal floor, freezing into ruby streaks in the dim light. His blue eyes burned not from pain, but from an unyielding fire, brighter than the embers falling outside. Beside him, Veyra clutched her shoulder, teal blood leaking through her silver fingers, her breaths faint as strangled wind, yet her silver eyes glowed, twin flames refusing to die in Xyleris' lethal cold. "We did it," she whispered, her voice raw with fatigue, each word a small blade piercing the heavy air. "The Iron Council can't use it to destroy humanity." Elias turned to her, a weary but warm smile breaking through, like light through thick ice. "Not just humanity," he replied, his tone deep and steady. "You saved your people too, Veyra. You're the flame that guided us all." She nodded slowly, her silver eyes softening briefly, but then darkened, a cold premonition rising from within, weighting the space between them. From the back, Kale, a young Xar'thul with bronze skin glinting like forged metal, shouted over the Engine's howl. "We're not clear yet. Raiders picking up something not Xar'thul, not human." Elias hunched over the screen, his blue eyes narrowing, heart skipping as a massive red blip appeared, racing from the distant horizon. It dwarfed any patrol ship, bigger than the nightmares he'd faced in 3 bloody years. "Extermination Fleet," he muttered, his voice sinking like cracking ice, cold and heavy, a judgment pronounced. Before anyone could react, a colossal blast shook the air. Through the blizzard, a monstrous ship emerged, black, spiked with jagged metal, glowing red like blood in the dark. It wasn't just a warship, it was a mothership of the Extermination Fleet, a harbinger humanity and Xar'thul had bled to hold back for years. "How'd they get here?" Veyra cried, gripping her seat, her silver nails gouging the metal, leaving shimmering scars. "The station couldn't signal before it blew." Her voice was sharp, trembling with dread, facing a truth beyond her worst fears. Elias clenched his jaw, slamming a fist on the console, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "Unless—" He paused, then roared. "The Shatterwave wasn't just a weapon, it was a beacon, calling them here." Veyra spun to him, her silver eyes wide, flashing with horror like unsheathed blades. "What?" she snarled, her voice breaking. Elias met her gaze, his blue eyes blazing against the dark. "The Iron Council played us all," he said, each word a hammer strike. "They didn't just want humanity gone, they summoned the fleet to wipe out both species, rebuilding from the ashes with them as the only survivors." Silence fell, deadly and thick, broken only by the Engine's faint whine and the wind's mournful wail. Kale leapt up, his bronze hands gripping an energy sword, its blue light casting his young, hard face in sharp relief. "Then we fight!" he roared, his voice ringing like clashing steel. "No one wins with our blood!" But before Elias could agree, a cold, metallic voice crackled through the calms, not human, not Xar'thul, but a soulless echo from a dead realm. "Lowly creatures," it growled, each word a cut. "You activated the signal. Your annihilation is inevitable." The ship lurched as a red energy beam from the mothership tore into a wing, shredding metal like cloth, spinning them out of control. "Brace!" Elias yelled, his voice overpowering the chaos, wrenching the controls with taut muscles. The ship slammed into a vast ice plain, a thunderous crash echoing as it skidded hundreds of meters, leaving a trail of smoke and debris. Elias staggered up, pulling Veyra from the wreck, his hands shaking but unyielding. Kale and 2 resistance fighters emerged, weapons in hand, but they all knew, no running, no hiding. Above, the mothership loomed like a giant specter, dozens of smaller craft spilling from its hull, diving like predatory birds, their red engines staining the ice with bloody light. Elias clasped Veyra's hand, feeling warmth in her silver skin amid the cold, his fingers tightening like a lifeline. "We can't beat that," he said, his voice rough, blue eyes locked on hers. "Not with a broken ship and a few guns." Veyra stared back, her silver eyes blazing with resolve, fearless despite her trembling frame. "But we can stop them from going further," she replied, her voice hard as steel. "The station has a nuclear reactor under the ice. Detonate it, and the blast takes out the mothership and us." Elias froze, his heart pounding, but before he could argue, Kale stepped forward, his energy sword flaring, blue light glinting off his scarred bronze face. "I'll do it," he said, his voice solid as ice, unwavering. "I didn't trust you at first, Elias Kane, but you've proven humans are worth fighting with. Let me end this for my kind, for my kin." Veyra gripped his hand, her silver eyes glistening, her voice breaking. "Kale, you don't have to." He cut her off, a faint smile on his lips. "Kin, I was born to protect our kind. This is my way, the only way." No time for debate. Elias nodded, his blue eyes meeting Kale's with a warrior's respect. "Go fast," he said, his voice firm. "We'll draw them off." Kale charged into the blizzard, his bronze form vanishing in the white, racing to the station with his sword a guiding flame. Elias, Veyra, and the others grabbed weapons from the wreck-cracked rifles, jagged metal scraps and braced for their last stand. They fired skyward, blue and red beams tearing the air, luring the enemy like moths to a defiant flame. The next minutes were a chaotic nightmare. Enemy ships dove, red beams blasting the ice into shards, dust swirling like a death veil. Elias and Veyra fought back to back. He downed a craft with a precise shot, while she ripped another apart with her silver hands, her teal blood mixing with the wreckage. But the foe was a tidal wave, unstoppable. A red beam struck Elias's leg, dropping him with a bone-cracking thud. Veyra screamed, shielding him, her silver arms wrapping him as another beam grazed her, teal blood splattering the ice. "Don't give up!" she yelled, hauling him up, her voice sharp but quaking with pain. "We've got to kill time!" Elias gritted his teeth, clinging to her, their blood pooling red and teal on the ice. "I won't," he growled, his voice raw but fierce. "Not with you here." They fought on, each second an eternity, every shot and strike a testament to their survival. The ground quaked, and a white pillar erupted from the distance, engulfing the station and the mother ship in a blinding blast, the shockwave hurling Elias and Veyra down, ash and dust choking the air. When it settled, Xyleris' sky fell still, debris raining like glittering tears under the stars' faint light. Elias lay there, breath ragged, hand clutching Veyra's, their blood a mingled tapestry of sacrifice. She smiled faintly, her silver eyes dimming, teal blood trickling from her lips. "We did it," she whispered, her voice soft but warm, a final breeze fading away. Elias pulled her close, tears streaking his scarred face, his voice breaking. "You can't die, Veyra. We've got more to fight together." She shook her head weakly, her silver hand resting on his chest, cold yet gentle. "You'll fight for me, Elias Kane," she said, her voice fading. "Show them, humanity's fire never dies. Nor does the Xar'thul's." Her silver eyes closed, her hand fell limp, but her smile lingered, a promise beyond death. Elias held her tight, screaming into the empty plain, his cry merging with the wind, a war cry against fate. The two remaining fighters staggered over, eyes red but resolute. Elias rose, legs trembling but unbowed, clutching his vanguard emblem, a token from countless battles. He placed it in Veyra's hand, fingers brushing her cold silver skin, a silent vow. "We're not done," he said, his voice low and hard as steel, blue eyes burning toward the icy horizon. "The Iron Council will pay. The Extermination Fleet won't win. Our fire-human, Xar'thul, burns forever." From the fading storm, a faint light emerged, not enemy, but a signal from a small fleet bearing Vanguard and Xar'thul resistance marks. They'd heard Kale's final call, seen the blast, and now came to fight on. Elias marched forward, leading the survivors, no longer a lone soldier in the snow. He was a living flame, blazing in Xyleris' endless cold, carrying Veyra's, Kale's, and all the fallen's legacy of fire, not just to survive, but to triumph, to forge a future where both species stood tall under a harsh world's cold light.